The Nexrian battle cruiser, Eternal Dawn, hung in space like a predatory creature, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Admiral Zyxtal stood on the command deck, his iridescent scales shimming with barely contained anticipation as he studied the human colony of New Eden through the ship's quantum imaging array. Primitive, he chittered to his command staff. Their orbital defenses are nothing more than retrofitted mining platforms. This will be over before their primary sun sets. The Nexrian Empire had dominated the Orion Arm for millennia, their crystalline technology so advanced it bordered on magical to most species they encountered. They had expected humanity's first deep space colony to capitulate immediately upon their arrival. Instead, these peculiar bipeds had refused to even acknowledge the Empire's demands for submission. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from their defensive platforms. They appear to be powering down." Zyxtal's membrane-covered eyes narrowed. In 300 years of military service, he had never seen prey simply shut down their defenses. "Scan for trickery," he ordered, but his instruments showed nothing but dormant platforms. The human colony below continued its routine activities, seemingly oblivious to the warship that could reduce their civilization to atoms. This behavior defied all strategic logic, and that made Zyxtal uncomfortable. "Send the ultimatum again," he commanded. "They have one standard rotation to surrender or we'll demonstrate our power." The message was transmitted, but New Eden's response was peculiar, complete radio silence. No pleas for mercy, no desperate negotiations, not even defiant threats. Just silence. As the deadline approached, Zyxtal's unease grew. The humans were behaving unlike any species the Empire had encountered. Their colony was substantial, nearly 1 million inhabitants spread across a sprawling metropolis beneath enormous environmental domes. Their technology was crude by Nexrian standards, but functional. They had achieved faster-than-light travel, even if their methods were inefficient and primitive. "Admiral," his tactical officer interrupted his thoughts, "we're detecting movement from the surface. Multiple launches." Zyxtal watched as dozens of small vessels rose from the colony's spaceport. They were ungainly things, clearly civilian craft not designed for combat. His tactical systems classified them as mining vessels, their hulls reinforced for asteroid drilling operations. "They're evacuating," his second-in-command suggested, but Zyxtal wasn't convinced. The vessels weren't heading away from the colony, they were spreading out in a peculiar pattern, maintaining position just beyond his ship's optimal weapons range. "A foolish attempt at creating a defensive screen," Zyxtal declared, though doubt crept into his voice. "Target the nearest vessel. One demonstration should dash." His words were cut short as alarms screamed across the command deck. The mining vessels had suddenly activated powerful magnetic fields, creating a complex web of gravitational distortions around his ship. "Impossible," Zyxtal gasped as he realized the human strategy. Those weren't defensive positions, they were attack coordinates. The mining vessel's magnetic fields began to pulse in perfect synchronization, creating gravitational waves that resonated with the crystalline structure of his ship's hull. The Eternal Dawn's crystal lattice began to vibrate, sending harmonic frequencies cascading through its structure. "Shut down the crystal matrix," Zyxtal ordered, but it was too late. The humans had weaponized basic physics against them. The crystalline technology that made Nexrian ships so powerful had become their weakness. Hairline fractures appeared across the hull as the resonance built to unbearable levels. The humans hadn't needed advanced weapons. They had simply observed the Nexrian ship's crystalline nature and devised a counter using their primitive mining equipment. Each magnetic pulse sent fresh vibrations through the ship, widening the cracks, threatening to shatter the vessel like glass. As emergency alerts flooded his command console, Zyxtal realized he had gravely underestimated these humans. They hadn't powered down their defenses out of fear or submission, they had been preparing this trap all along. "All power to structural integrity," he shouted, but the order came too late. The resonance reached critical levels, and the first sections of his mighty warship began to break apart. The last thing Admiral Zyxtal saw before emergency teleportation whisked him to safety was the sight of his magnificent vessel crumbling into crystalline dust, defeated not by advanced weapons, but by human ingenuity in basic scientific principles. As escape pods launched from the disintegrating warship, New Eden's mining fleet maintained their formation, ready to repeat their performance if needed. In the colony's command center, Governor Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile. First contact had come with a price, but humanity had just proved they wouldn't be easy prey for any empire, no matter how advanced. The message had been sent across the stars: underestimate humanity at your own peril. News of the Eternal Dawn's destruction spread through the Nexrian Empire like a shockwave. In the Imperial Palace on Nexus Prime, High Commander Vraxol's crystalline carapace pulsed with barely contained rage as he reviewed the battle footage for the 100th time. One colony, he hissed to his assembled war council. One primitive human colony destroyed our most advanced warship using mining equipment. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. The war council chamber, carved from living crystal that normally sang with harmonic energies, had fallen silent. None dared speak as their leader's scales shifted from iridescent blue to the deep purple of murderous intent. We will crush them, Vraxol declared. Prepare the Seventh Fleet. Their primitive tricks won't work against multiple ships. He turned to his chief scientist, and strengthen our crystal matrices against resonance attacks. But humanity had no intention of using the same trick twice. 3 weeks later, the Seventh Fleet dropped out of hyperspace near New Eden. 15 crystal ships, their hulls reinforced against harmonic weapons, arranged themselves in attack formation. Fleet Commander Ixil allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. This would be a swift victory. Multiple contacts, her sensor officer announced. Human vessels approaching from the asteroid belt. Ixil studied the tactical display. Instead of mining ships, the humans had sent what appeared to be cargo haulers, massive, ungainly vessels designed to transport ore between star systems. Their holds were open, apparently empty. They mean to surrender their transport fleet? Ixil wondered aloud, but decades of combat experience told her something was wrong. Scan those ships. What are they carrying? Before her crew could respond, the cargo haulers executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for vessels their size. They split apart, their empty holds revealing themselves to be massive launcher tubes. Each hauler had been converted into a carrier for hundreds of smaller craft. By the crystal throne, Ixil whispered as her tactical display lit up with thousands of signatures. The humans had turned their cargo haulers into makeshift carriers, launching swarms of small, agile craft that her sensors couldn't properly track. These weren't fighters in any traditional sense. They were maintenance drones, normally used for hull repairs, modified with minimal life support systems and piloted by human crews. Too small to mount significant weapons, but also too small for the Nexrians' crystal-based targeting systems to lock onto effectively. The swarm descended on the Seventh Fleet like angry insects. Ixil watched in horror as the drones attached themselves to her ship's hulls. They weren't attacking, they were painting targeting coordinates with primitive laser designators. Evasive action, she ordered, but the crystal ships were too large, too slow to shake off their tiny attackers. That's when the second wave hit. From the shadow of New Eden's moon, humanity's remaining mining vessels emerged. But instead of generating harmonic fields, they had been retrofitted with mass drivers. Crude but devastating weapons that fired chunks of metal at relativistic speeds. The drone's targeting data allowed the mining ships to hit with terrifying accuracy. The crystal ship shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved useless against kinetic impacts. One by one, Ixil watched her mighty warships shatter under the barrage. Impossible, she breathed as a slug punched through her flagship's command deck. They're nothing but miners and cargo haulers. The battle for New Eden ended in less than an hour. The mighty Seventh Fleet lay in ruins, defeated by ships that had never been designed for combat. Humanity had turned their civilian vessels into a makeshift but devastatingly effective combat force. In the aftermath, as rescue operations began for surviving Nexrian crew members, Governor Chen received a priority transmission from Earth. The United Earth government had monitored the battle, and a decision had been made. Humanity would not wait for the Nexrians to return with an even larger fleet. Operation Shattered Crown is authorized, the message read. Take the fight to them. Chen smiled as she looked out her window at the assembled fleet of retrofitted civilian ships. The Nexrians had expected to find easy prey at the edges of human space. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. Humanity wasn't just going to defend itself, it was going to show the galaxy why you should never corner a species that had survived and thrived through countless challenges on their homeworld. The real war was about to begin. The crystal spires of Nexus Prime cast prismatic shadows across the Imperial War Chamber as High Commander Vraxol received increasingly desperate reports from his outer colonies. 3 months had passed since the disaster at New Eden, and humanity had proven to be far more than a mere irritation. They're not following any known strategic doctrine, his intelligence chief reported, scales dulled with exhaustion. Each attack is different, unpredictable. They're turning our own infrastructure against us. The tactical display showed a spreading web of human advances across Nexrian space. But they weren't capturing territories in any traditional sense. Instead, they were conducting precision strikes that crippled the Empire's ability to respond effectively. Show me the latest attack, Vraxol commanded, his voice heavy with dread. The holographic display shifted to footage from the crystalline foundries of Helios 6, one of the Empire's primary shipyards. The humans had struck not with warships, but with modified long-range cargo transporters. The massive vessels had appeared at the edge of the system, seemingly damaged and requesting emergency docking clearance. They claimed to be refugees from their own worlds, the intelligence chief explained. Our security protocols failed to account for such deception. Once docked, the cargo ships had revealed their true purpose. Their holds weren't filled with civilians, but with a substance that the humans called quick-setting concrete, a primitive but effective building material. They had pumped this liquid stone into the crystalline construction bays, letting it harden and completely disable the foundry's ability to grow new warships. They've done similar things across 17 systems, the intelligence chief continued. Mining explosives used to collapse crystalline power nodes. Industrial acids dumped into our living crystal architecture. They're not trying to destroy our worlds, they're paralyzing our military infrastructure using industrial materials we never considered as weapons. Vraxol's scales shifted to a deep black of despair. The humans had studied the Nexrians' dependence on crystalline technology and found countless ways to disrupt it using simple chemistry and physics. Their attacks required minimal military resources but achieved maximum strategic impact. Surely we can adapt, he demanded. We have dominated space for millennia. We're trying, but their methods keep changing. Last week, they filled an abandoned freighter with metallic dust and detonated it near the crystal gates of Proxima 3. The particles contaminated the gate's matrix, making crystalline computing impossible. We had to shut down our primary communication hub in that sector. The reports continued, each more disturbing than the last. Humans had modified atmospheric processors to create localized ion storms that disrupted crystal-based sensors. They had developed simple electromagnetic pulses that caused crystalline circuits to temporarily degrade. Even their information warfare was devastatingly effective, broadcasting frequencies that caused subtle but cumulative damage to crystal-based communication systems. What of the counterstrike fleet? Vraxol asked, referring to the massive armada he had assembled to attack Earth itself. Delayed, High Commander. The humans have been seeding their space with what they call space junk, debris fields of specialized materials that our ships can't safely pass through. We'd need to clear paths through thousands of light-years of space before we could reach their homeworld. Vraxol slumped in his crystal throne, its usual harmonious resonance now feeling discordant. The humans weren't fighting a war of conquest, they were fighting a war of disruption. Each attack demonstrated not just their ingenuity, but their fundamental understanding of how to turn the Nexrians' technological superiority into a weakness. High Commander, his strategic advisor spoke up, there might be another option. Our deep space sensors have detected a human colony ship heading for unexplored space. It's isolated, vulnerable. If we could capture it intact, study their technology and methods up close. Vraxol's scales flickered with renewed interest. How far? 3 days at maximum speed. We've assembled a special task force, ships modified based on what we've learned from their attacks. This time, we'll be ready for their tricks. The High Commander rose, his crystalline armor catching the light. Prepare my ship. I will lead this mission personally. His voice hardened with determination. It's time we taught these humans the price of defying the Empire. As preparations began for what would become known as the Nexrian Gambit, warning signals were already racing through human space. The colony ship's vulnerability was no accident. Humanity had learned much about crystal-based technology in the past months, and they had prepared a surprise of their own. The trap was set. The only question was, who was hunting whom? The human colony ship, New Horizon, drifted through deep space, its massive hull reflecting distant starlight. To Vraxol's experienced eye, it appeared exactly as intelligence had described, a lumbering giant, filled with cryogenic pods carrying sleeping colonists to some distant world. His task force of 5 specially modified warships surrounded the vessel at a safe distance. Each ship had been retrofitted with experimental shielding designed to counter human tactics. Their crystalline matrices were reinforced, their sensors calibrated to detect even the smallest threatening particles. No response to our hails, his communications officer reported. Life signs are minimal, mostly automated systems and a skeleton crew. Vraxol's scales rippled with satisfaction. Finally, an easy target. Prepare boarding teams. I want that ship taken intact. As his crews mobilized, something about the colony ship's design nagged at his consciousness. Its hull was oddly structured, with thick layers of what appeared to be basic metal plating. No obvious weapons, but numerous large ports and hatches covered its surface. Curious design for a colony ship, he mused aloud. Scan those hatches. What's behind them? Before his crew could respond, the New Horizon suddenly came alive. Those mysterious hatches burst open, but instead of weapons or fighter craft, they released clouds of what appeared to be water. Water? Vraxol laughed. They think to defeat us with frozen water. His amusement died as his science officer screamed in panic. It's not just water. The liquid is saturated with billions of microscopic machines, nanites. The clouds of nanite-infused water spread rapidly, drawn toward the crystal ships by carefully calibrated electromagnetic fields. As the particles made contact with the crystalline hulls, they began their work. Each microscopic machine was programmed for one task, to alter the molecular structure of Nexrian crystal technology. Our shields, the tactical officer cried. They're turning organic. Vraxol watched in horror as his fleet's crystal matrices began to transform. The nanites were rewriting the very structure of their technology, converting inorganic crystal into organic coral-like formations. Systems failed as circuitry became living tissue, pulsing with unwanted life. Impossible, he whispered, watching his mighty warships transform into floating reefs of living crystal. This level of molecular engineering. But the humans weren't finished. From within the colony ship's hull emerged what appeared to be massive terraforming engines, devices designed to reshape planetary environments. But these had been modified, their atmospheric processors now projecting fields of carefully calibrated gases. Those gases, his science officer reported, voice trembling, they're promoting rapid growth in the organic crystals. The converted crystal ships began to grow uncontrollably, their newly organic structures multiplying like cancer. Critical systems were engulfed by spreading crystal coral formations. Power cores shut down as their containment chambers warped and twisted. Vraxol realized too late the true genius of the human strategy. They hadn't just found a way to defeat Nexrian technology, they had found a way to turn it against itself. His mighty warships were being transformed into drifting gardens of crystal coral, their crews evacuating as systems failed one by one. All ships, retreat, he ordered, but the organic growth had already compromised their engines. They were trapped, forced to watch as their vessels were transformed into floating artistic monuments to human ingenuity. From the colony ship's bridge, Commander Elena Santos watched the transformation with grim satisfaction. The New Horizon wasn't really a colony ship, it was humanity's first dedicated bio-warfare vessel, designed specifically to counter Nexrian crystal technology. Message from Fleet Command, her communications officer reported. The Nexrian capital ships have been detected leaving their defensive positions around Nexus Prime. They're mobilizing their entire fleet to respond to this threat. Santos smiled. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Nexrians were about to learn that this colony ship had enough nanites to convert their entire fleet into floating crystal gardens. Their greatest strength, their advanced crystal technology, would become their ultimate weakness. Send word to Earth, she ordered. Operation Coral Garden is a success. Phase 2 can begin. As rescue pods from the transformed Nexrian ships approached the New Horizon, Santos prepared to accept their surrender. The true scope of humanity's plan was about to unfold, and the galaxy would never be the same. The crystalline throne room of Nexus Prime had lost its luster. Where once the walls sang with harmonic energies, now they stood silent, their surfaces dulled by fear of human nanite conversion. High Commander Vraxol, his own scales faded to a pale gray, faced the assembled Imperial Council. 3/4 of our fleet, he reported, his voice hollow. Transformed into floating gardens of living crystal. Our remaining ships dare not approach human space for fear of contamination. We are defenseless. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Millennia of Nexrian dominance were crumbling, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through human creativity and understanding of fundamental natural principles. Then, unexpectedly, a transmission cut through their communications network. On every screen and holographic display across Nexus Prime appeared the image of Admiral Sarah Chen, the same governor who had first defeated a Nexrian warship at New Eden. People of the Nexrian Empire, she began, her voice translated perfectly into crystalline harmonics. We offer you peace. The council fell silent, their scales shifting in confusion. They had expected demands for surrender, not an offer of peace. Humanity does not seek your destruction or submission, Chen continued. We have demonstrated our ability to neutralize your military capability, yes. But that was never our ultimate goal. Holographic displays showed the transformed Nexrian ships, their crystal coral structures now teeming with new forms of life. Your crystal technology is remarkable, Chen explained. But you've limited its potential by focusing solely on military applications. We've shown you another path. The displays shifted to show laboratory data. The organic crystal formations created by human nanites were displaying properties that defied conventional physics. They could store vast amounts of energy, process information at unprecedented speeds, and even facilitate new forms of faster-than-light travel. We propose an alliance, Chen declared. Your understanding of crystal technology combined with our innovation and adaptability. Together, we could transform the galaxy not through conquest, but through progress. Vraxol studied the data scrolling across his screens. The humans hadn't just defeated them, they had revolutionized their technology. The weapons they had deployed were actually tools of transformation, showing the Nexrians possibilities they had never imagined. Your ships aren't destroyed, Chen continued. They're evolved. The nanites didn't just convert crystal to organic matter, they created hybrid systems that surpass both original forms. You've been seeing this as an ending. We see it as a beginning. The council chamber hummed with growing excitement as the implications became clear. The humans were offering not just peace, but partnership. They had mastered the art of combining biological and crystal technologies in ways that the Nexrians, for all their advancement, had never considered. The choice is yours, Chen concluded. Continue seeing us as enemies, or join us in exploring what our combined knowledge could achieve. We await your response. The transmission ended, leaving the council in contemplative silence. Vraxol rose from his throne, his scales slowly shifting to the deep blue of profound realization. They could have converted our entire civilization, he mused. Instead, they showed us restraint, wisdom, and a vision of something greater than conquest. One by one, the council members' scales began to shift to colors of agreement. The Nexrian Empire had ruled through technological superiority, but humanity had shown them something more valuable: the power of innovation, adaptation, and cooperation. 10 years later, the Nexrian-Human Alliance had transformed the galaxy. The crystal coral hybrid technology revolutionized everything from space travel to environmental restoration. Former warships, transformed into living research vessels, explored the frontiers of space. The crystal spires of Nexus Prime sang again, but with new harmonies that combined Nexrian tradition with human creativity. And in deep space, where the first converted ships still drifted, their crystal coral structures had become sanctuaries for new forms of life. They stood as monuments not to warfare, but to the moment when two civilizations chose to transform conflict into cooperation. Humanity had proven that true victory sometimes means showing your adversary not defeat, but a better path forward. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what both species had hoped for.